Dear God, that was much longer than I meant it. Hi guys, how are you? Halfway through that, I was just like, whoa, this is really, really long. Okay, so, hi guys, and welcome to A Brief History Mystery and our Mystery Machine episodes. And we are back with Dave, who is not that side, he is that side.
Hey there. Hello.
Our friend Steve with the pimp in his t-shirt out. Look at
Hi guys.
Yeah, check it out.
What a pimp. But so, this evening, we are going to be talking about ghosts, but more importantly, paranormal investigation. And our silly little intro is the only piss-taking we're going to be doing in this video. Maybe. But yeah, paranormal investigations, mainly motivated because I don't believe in ghosts. Not even a bit. But I am basing that opinion on almost no evidence. So the only way to have an opinion in my mind is to actually have an educated, actually think about it and actually learn about it. So we have Dave over here that knows a lot about this subject, and Steve, who is a firm believer in ghosts. So we're going to talk it through. But first of all, I'll just say why I don't actually believe in ghosts, because I used to love a good ghost story. And when I was young, I did believe in ghosts because my auntie actually believed she had a ghost in her house. And the one incident really did actually genuinely freak me out. I remember the dog ran to the top of the stairs and was barking like crazy, staring downstairs and was barking like mad. He then cowered in the corner, and we saw this. It was very creepy. Cowered in the corner. There's nothing there. Then shot down the stairs, turned around, and was barking back up the stairs like mad. But then I saw a documentary about this guy, Michael Persinger, who's a Canadian neuroscientist. And he basically said a lot of ghosts are to do with, and people who believe they see spirits and things, is to do with electromagnetic energy. And then we know like a lot of ghost haunted houses and things in the limestone and things like this that we know affect electromagnetic energy. And that electromagnetic energy can affect our brains. And he could use this thing called a God helmet. And he could affect the EM energy and make you believe that somebody or an unknown thing is watching you, and that you're not alone in a room and stuff. So that just made sense to me. And I thought, that's a bit crap. Ghosts don't exist. So I've aged and matured a little bit. So we're going to have a chat about what we think actually. What is the evidence? What sort of techniques are used if somebody's to go on a paranormal investigation? And then we're going to discuss that actually it's something we would love to do and that we are going to do, and something Dave has done. So Dave, first of all, then, if we head over to you, what are your feelings about paranormal investigations as a whole and ghosts, and what's your general sort of feeling before we start talking about the technology and the things you'd use if you went on a paranormal investigation?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is regarding the intro, actually. Over a period of a few years, there was a haunted highway, if you like, a bypass here in the UK, which has become infamous for sightings over the years, mainly because of sightings in the 1980s when they done roadworks, and it's the Stocksbridge bypass. And it attracted the attention of both myself and a couple of other team members. So because of this, and a documentary actually that we saw, I forget the name of it now actually, but a documentary that stuck with me. Obviously not enough to remember the name of it, but the content of it stuck with me. So it would become a prime location, and we would go there as often as we could because we would get interesting results, which I'm not going to go into. Maybe later, but we would get interesting results, which would, of course, fuel the enthusiasm towards wanting to go back. And we've been there that many times. On one specific night, we pulled up onto it's called Peroid Lane, and you come through the town of Stocksbridge, and you go up a hill, Peroid Lane, and then over the actual bypass itself towards a pylon. Which has been the if you like the epicenter, for want of a better word, for a lot of activity, a monk being sighted and children's voices being heard singing and various other phenomena. And we pulled up on this one particular night, and they were full of cars. There were cars on the left-hand side of the bridge over the bypass, on the right-hand side, and parked up near the pylon. What the hell is this like? and they're all stood. Loads of people stood in the road as well, and they recognised the car. And as we pulled up, they all started clapping, and they turned the stereo. This one particular car turned the stereo on full blast, and they played that frigging music as loud as they possibly could, because we've been there so often and so many times, called in at the same chippy, and the locals had got to know us. The police turned up and everything because of the noise and flashing lights. And and that's the first thing that came in my mind when you played that tune. That's why I was shaking my head as it was coming into the intro. Then it was like, oh no, because there's a cheese element which segues me into your original question, and paranormal investigation has changed a lot over the years, and that's the attitude and the expectation towards getting result. And I think it's been a bit of a double-edged sword, Jay, because whilst certain TV shows have sort of helped perpetuate the growth of paranormal investigative teams, they've also sort of turned it into, made it almost like soap opera-esque. And people have an expectation that the kind of thing that you see on TV is the kind of thing that you will experience when you go out and conduct a paranormal investigation yourself. And unfortunately, that's not the case. In many ways, I think you could sort of like consider paranormal investigation to be similar to warfare, in so much, I'll validate that statement, that there's 95% nothing going on at all, and then 5% pandemonium that you don't have a lot of control of. It is completely wild and bizarre, and then it's done with. But the way that it's portrayed in media leads to an expectation that people then seek rather than looking for answers. And because of that, a lot of the time, the experience suits the narrative rather than the actual results narrating the experience.
Because you mentioned the TV shows. I mean, obviously, Most Haunted was very popular TV show a while ago with Yvette Fielding of Peter Kane.
The Scream Queen.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
What? Who was the psychic? Psychic. And he's good.
Derek Okora.
God, that man pissed me off. It would just be, I'm a maid. Are you? Okay. But it was always exactly the same spiel. And orbs just annoyed me. In low light cameras, dust and things go up because they're moving through the areas and you see little, and they'd be like, look, an orb. Is it? But I think that's like, right, there was an expectation every week that something had to happen.
Yeah. Because
it's a TV show. And then obviously American TV shows since have like, and took that to a whole different level. I think there's a temptation for a lot of those TV shows to fake things though, if they don't.
Absolutely, completely, 100% without hesitation, deviation in any way whatsoever, because it's about putting asses on seats. If you want to run a 24-show series about paranormal investigation, and obviously whilst you're doing this recording, your experiences might happen at one location out of all them locations. You've got 23 episodes of nothing happening. Your show's going to crash and it's going to burn. It really is that simple. It's going to crash. It's going to burn. And it's all about the ratings. And that's the sad truth of it. And it's even the same now if you have a YouTube channel, or it's not so much mainstream TV that you're putting out shows, if you like, on YouTube. It's the same thing, because you still want the views, you still want the watch hours. So that's feeding it rather than the actual seeking the truth and trying to garner evidence. And then and we'll go into this. What would constitute evidence in the first place? So I do think they will fake it, absolutely.
I get that a lot with in my YouTube channel. We talk about conspiracies and mysteries and things, and somebody will comment, "You don't tell us anything new." I'm like, well, what do you expect? We're talking about the JFK assassination or something. This has been researched for the last 50 years. What you expect me to? Because I think people are actually used to, a lot of channels, they just make crap up.
Yeah.
Far Side of the Moon, I'm looking at you. They just make things up to get ratings, and they don't actually care, because as long as enough people believe it, they'll get clicks and they'll get subscribers.
That's the thing. There's many millions of people that will believe anything that's thrown in front of them. You know what I mean? You just have to look on Facebook to see that with all the
It just sort of
ghost Facebook
reminds
thing.
me of sorry, Steve. It reminds me of a comment that was made when we done the Jack the Ripper suspects stream. You know, somebody saying, well, you see, you've made the biggest mistake when it could have been a woman." And it's like, well, actually, if my friend, you've made the biggest mistake in thinking that we aren't capable of imagining it could be a woman as well. However, we were talking about named suspects or possible suspects for Jack the Ripper, and until there was a female put forward, we can't do that. But feel free to name one, you know.
Yeah. And also, like, is it 95% of serial killers are men?
Yeah, and I said all this as well about.
I mean, but yeah, that's the thing. We follow evidence, and I think that's one of the reasons why I quite regularly think I should actually just release a video, or I just like claim like really crazy shit. And a lot of my actually amazing subscribers would go, "What are you doing?" Because why are you saying that sort of thing? But actually, I'd probably get 10,000 subscribers. So I'm going to do that one day.
I'm absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt. I think if I'm not that bothered about actually uploading videos and conducting like live investigations for YouTube anymore. I sort of lost the urge to do that in, I don't know, 2012 maybe. But I'm fairly sure that if I completely sold out and fabricated a lot of things and done all the jump scare stuff every time a shadow moved, I'd have 50,000 subscribers. Yeah. No danger. I'm fairly sure of that. Yeah,
that's it.
I just behind a rock.
There you go. There you go.
So, say we wanted to go on a paranormal investigation then tomorrow. All right. So now I'm genuinely coming at this kind of blind, because obviously not really believing in ghosts. I've never really researched it a great deal. So, but I'm always open to learning new things because, like I said to you, Dave, my opinion on this is based on almost nothing. Mm-hmm. So I don't really have a right to have an opinion in some ways. I've never experienced anything that I would consider to be particularly paranormal, other than that one incident with the dog. But that might have just been a mental dog, for all I know. I don't know. I do think quite methodically in the way I think about things. I need evidence. I need something that makes sense to me. And that's why I say this Michael Persinger stuff it just made sense to me. I do come from a psychology background as well, which we're going to talk about a lot later when people maybe get these things wrong. But say we wanted to go on an investigation tomorrow, what would we need? What technology could help us, or do we just need our wits? What sort of thing would you say is like a basic?
Well, I think fundamentally, most of my paranormal investigation has been done around residential properties, where people have experienced obviously strange going-ons that they can't explain. That's led them to some cases not wanting to stay in their own house and fleeing the property. And then so you get residential ongoing sort of investigations, but you will get, if you like, legendary or well-known haunted locations around the UK, around the world, which they've been put on TV, so people are massively aware of them. So that it will change. It depends. If you were going to a legendary or an historical location, I'll call it, then you can just take whatever you want, really, because you're going to be predisposed towards an expectation and an acceptation of validation, if you like, because you are aware of certain phenomena that has already happened. So you're sort of halfway there, really. But fundamentally, when it comes to residential investigation, what's needed is if the report has come to you, is to obviously speak to the client on the telephone. And after doing so is to go and do a preliminary investigation. And when you do so, that is to take baseline tests, obviously. So you will interview the person who's having the experiences at the property, excuse me, and find out what type of phenomena that they're claiming to experience, and try and gather prosaic, more explainable reasons as to why that might be occurring. But fundamentally, to take baseline tests things within the house. So, making note of electrical supplies and, finding out if there's been any wiring work done, plumbing, what condition the plumbing is, how old the house is, what was there at the location of the house before they took on the property, and looking into the history of the area as well. And sometimes even asking questions that might be a little bit personal, finding out whether the client has a history of being on, either a prescription medication, drinks or takes recreational drugs. A lot of people don't like to ask them kind of questions because they feel like they're imposing upon.
I imagine you would, Dave. Not enjoy it, but I think you'd have absolutely no problem with it. So.
I don't mind at all, Jay. You've nailed my hat right on. I have no problem asking them, "Are you a junkie?" No, it's not quite like that.
It is Venkman at the start of the Ghostbusters movie, though, isn't it? Because are you currently menstruating?
yeah, absolutely. But
you're going to look at everything other than Ghost first, haven't you? You've got to dismiss the mundane.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt, 100%. And whilst you're conducting the investigation, even when you've ruled that out, you have to also accept that you will get transient environmental external phenomena that can also come into play that weren't active during your baseline test. So whilst you're conducting your baseline test, and say, for instance, you want to take electromagnetic field readings, and they're showing what would be the normal. Now, normal isn't zero. Normal can be, if you're measuring in milligauss or microtesla, the background EMF radiation for any given location or property will have its own reading. It won't be absolute zero. It can be 0.2 milligauss. It can be whatever. You can move to another room nearer to, like, a big widescreen TV, and guess what, everybody? The EM field's going to be higher, peeps, and over near the wireless router, you're going to get higher readings and stuff. So making notes and taking these background checks you do have to do a baseline, but that doesn't mean it can't fluctuate. The Earth itself, we live in a geomagnetic world. Environmentally, we're surrounded by pockets of EM fields, and they fluctuate. So you are open to that changing. So you rule out what would be considered to be normal, Jay. But you constantly have to do that throughout. I see many people chasing demons and flashing lights and forgetting that that's what they're supposed to do, quite frankly.
You're supposed to eliminate it. But that's not just true with ghosts, is it? I mean, it's true with UFO research, cryptozoology. I mean, Fack mentioned earlier a little bit is what is the paranormal, and he's right. It's not just ghosts. We're talking about ghosts a little bit today, but it's UFOs, cryptozoology, and that eliminating the thing. And I think sometimes when you get a sighting or something happens, it's very easily to get overexcited and to jump straight to I've just seen something weird, when in fact you've maybe just seen something very mundane. I know I've been a victim of that myself. You go excited, and it's only later when you look back at it and think, no, actually that could have just been something.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very easily done. So, I mean, what are the ways to avoid that then? What are the ways to sort of corroborate when something does happen, or to validate when something happens, whether it's interesting or not?
I think that's a very good question. And you did you did say something before about keeping your wits about you, and that's the big part of it. Fundamentally, a lot of everything regarding the paranormal is down usually to personal experience, to people having personal experiences at a base individual level or a small group level. But it's about the individual. It's about person. It's about a human experiencing phenomena that they can't explain. That is outside of the realms of their comprehension, or as far as they're aware, outside the realms of scientific explanation. So because of that, keeping your wits about you, yes. Staying focused on what you're intending to do, trusting in the equipment that you were using to gather said evidence, and fundamentally understanding how your equipment works, because it's okay taking lots of equipment with you and using that equipment, but if you don't know what that equipment is used for, then it's of no use to you whatsoever. So it's about staying focused, trusting in the equipment not giving into every single. You'd be amazed. Well, you probably wouldn't actually, because you're a student of psychology like myself. But you will understand how group hysteria can get like a domino effect where hysteria is concerned, very, very easily, and people can be easily influenced by the mood of people that are around it. It's human condition. So, it's always a difficult one to answer that. I mean, what would constitute evidence is the golden fleece for paranormal investigation, for cryptozoology, and for ufology and other things.
I think one of the things I've seen doing a little bit of research today was like people using like FLIR or infrared cameras, and then I think if you're going to do that, you need to really be aware of certain things like residue heat from just walking across a room will leave residue heat, in places, and it can, you'll see spots, sort of thing. Things like reflections off even mirrors and things can create unusual effects. I've seen infrared cameras that can see the wires in walls because they're generating a small amount of heat. If you're not used to that camera, if you're not used to that technology, you might think you're seeing something very, very strange when actually you're just seeing what the camera can see. That's what I always talk about using low light cameras for C5 in UFOs. You see a low light camera and there's an object moving around and it seems to be reacting to a laser, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's a bat. It doesn't look like a bat, but I've used low light cameras in the past, and things look weird in them. And if you're not used to that, you might think you're seeing something very unusual when actually you're just seeing something very, very normal. A lot of CE5 videos of bats, by the way, unfortunately. Technology.
Well, I mean, sorry, Jay. I will pick up on using infrared cameras. Whether it be digital stills cameras. Whether you're taking digital stills cameras, it can be any kind of digital still cameras. Massively famous for capturing the orbs that everybody was so fond of in the early 1990s. But your digital still cameras now, it can be regular visible light or VL, so your usual light that we all know and love, to full spectrum to infrared. Now, the thing about infrared is that's also become famous because of TV, really. It's come around because of a concept of the reason that we don't see things in every day is because they're in a different light spectrum that we can't see, and every now and then the conditions are right that we do see them, yada yada yada. So it's like, well, what light spectrums can we see in now? Of course, we see reds and blues and the colors twixt, as it were, in between. But when we go into infrared and we go over to the other side, obviously, and ultraviolet, depending upon the nanometers, the wavelength, and when you start getting to 850, 940 nanometers, it's usually where we use infrared photography. And the thinking is that those cameras, because they pick up on infrared energy, on a spectrum of light that we don't see in, that they will capture paranormal activity, or they will capture a spirit outline or a full body apparition that we can't see with the naked eye. So they became popular for that. They also allowed for the greenish tinge, which looked creepy on TV. The black and white tinge that looks creepy on TV, and the light reflecting, he looks ghostly, absolutely. Looks eerie. And the eye shine that you see even in human beings when they're using infrared. As far as evidence goes, and anybody can do a quick internet search on this. This isn't like a huge secret. Finding what you could consider to be video evidence of any kind of strange anomalous phenomena regarding an apparition or what appears to be an apparition isn't just confined to infrared photography. Most videos, in fact, of paranormal phenomena are captured on daytime cameras. They're captured on visible light cameras, not infrared at all, and certainly not full spectrum, which, then became, a lot of people started to use full spectrum. I've got full spectrum. So infrared, and now you also recording in UV and visible light. but the it hasn't helped gather more evidence because people use infrared. Far from it. Most things are captured in visible light. We don't see in infrared. We see invisible light. We see in the light spectrum, obviously, that we see in. So when we have experiences, we see them in visible light. Obviously, we don't see them in infrared. So why there was the switch over to infrared, that was driven really by medium and the creepiness, and because you can walk around in the complete dark, you can film in the complete dark, and you can have an experience because your senses are heightened because you stood in the complete dark. So infrared, it does have its uses. It does have its uses. I will use infrared, I will use UV, I will use full spectrum, and I will also use white light or visible light for that reason. And I certainly won't, I won't just like take one and expect that to be the be all and end all of capturing evidence, because that just isn't the case.
Well, the thing is, I suppose we have to try different things, and when low light cameras, infrared, they became sort of like affordable, I suppose it made sense to try to use them for this thing, and it's because obviously I suppose before the 90s they weren't affordable, so yeah, I suppose that makes sense.
They're much more affordable now. You're going to walk around, this is all of us will have at least one of these, and there may be 5, 6, 7 of them actually in locked off locations on a tripod. So an external IR illuminator there, that's actually putting out a lot of infrared. So you're doing obviously an outdoor investigation. This is gonna put you out a fair amount of light, and obviously microphone to pick up any kind of anomalous audio that you're going to pick up as well. And it looks the part, it looks great, but you can equally just go around with it with your phone with a light on and recording video. It's
good.
You'll do the same thing.
Because the wife won't let me spend a lot of money when we go on this investigation. So because she checks my bank account. So unless I get lots of donations this evening,
pay.
I won't be buying one of those cameras. But no, obviously I see a lot of evidence that's obviously like the voice box or the tape recordings, and they ask questions. Things. Is there the evidence you're aware of, Dave and Steve? Is there more evidence like for the sound or noise that they make, or is there more sort of visual evidence? Do you think is one more weighted than the other? Is one more important than the other?
Steve, do you want to give a response on that one?
Excuse me. I don't know, to be honest. It seems on the little recorders like that, especially with other shows and YouTube channels and things like that as well, that there seems to be a lot of it going about, that everyone will capture something all the time. Whereas in my experience, and probably Dave's as well, that's not the case. You're not always going to get something. Again, you are listening, or you are trying to listen out for a human voice as well. So anything that sounds a little bit off in the distance, you're automatically going to pick that up and think that that's somebody speaking to you, trying to answer what you're saying. And just watching any type of YouTube video where they're using one of them, and one person hears it and says, "Oh, I think he said dead," and then another person will say, "Oh, I thought he said shot in the head or something else," and you'll get loads of people's different opinions of what they thought was said. But it's I've caught things, EVPs and things like that before, that you just can't explain. But it's just another tool to add to the sort of.
It's not more important than anything else. It's just another tool. It's another way of gathering more information.
I think, and this isn't just to do like an automatic gainsay thing with anybody else, but I think as a fundamental piece of equipment, an audio recorder it is important. because even if you can't use it, and I'll just sort of not justify, but explain why I'm saying that, because I'm not disagreeing with Steve. I'm just is because you can at least log events that are occurring in real time, just like you would use a dictaphone to record a meeting, what goes on in a meeting. So you can do that, and just for that reason alone, it is an indispensable piece of equipment. When I'm on residential investigations, I will use 24-bit 96 kilohertz digital recorders with multiple channels and condenser microphones for closer proximity effect recording to sort of negate any kind of outside contamination that you might get. Because the truth of the matter is, if you just put a recorder in a room and you hear a bang or you hear a voice, unless you can 100% say that and that was in a completely sterile environment, that voice or that bang could have come from anywhere. It could have come from outside. It could have come from reverberated through the building. In the case of a bang, it could come from anywhere. So when you're using condenser microphones with closer proximity type things, I mean, they're electric condensers usually in things like this. Is usually if it's not within a couple of feet of it, it's not going to pick it up. And like the microphone I'm using here, the further away I go, the quieter it become. And when you back off the gain, which is the, if you like, the amount of input amplification on an audio signal, when you back that off, I will completely disappear if I move a couple of feet away. So you can sort of like at least try to make it as sterile as you possibly can. Now, I'm giving an example here. This wasn't even an investigation. I was at a friend's house and we were playing guitar, jamming. And midway through doing this, we had what sounded like a click, like a pop, a static burst of electricity, which I thought was weird, but that was it. We just carried on. I sort of think, at the end of the song, it was like, did you hear that? Like, yeah, I heard that. That was weird. And moved on. Thought no more about it. And at that time, my old man was, he had a studio set up, and I said, we've done a new song, and sent him this recording. And he phoned me like 1 o'clock in the morning. I said, have you heard what's on the recording? I said, well, yes, I was playing it. Of course I have. He said, no, there's a woman's voice. And he said, and you hear it on the recording. And I was like, I didn't hear anything on the recording, Dad. I didn't hear a woman's voice. The only thing we heard was a click. There was no click. We heard it. There's a woman's voice that says, bless you. She said the words, bless you. And, long story short, anyway, that corresponds with the exact time when we heard a static burst, and it was like a click. It was like a snap. We didn't hear a voice. There was no voice at all. But it coincided exactly with that. Now, that led me to start doing spectral analysis on audio. And since doing that, the amount of audio recordings that I've actually got where you think you're hearing a voice or you think you're hearing breaths or that kind of thing, is when you look on the spectrograph that it doesn't fall in the range of a human, of the human voice range. It just doesn't fall. It'll fall outside of it, or you get what are called artifacts or spurios and sproggies, birdies, chirps that are down to the internal circuitry of the actual recorder that you're using. And the DR60 was famous for it. They recalled the DR60 because of this. Because when you've done a recording, it would growl. You would hear like growling and all sorts of heavy breathing and they loved it. It's sold all over the States. I think now if you look for one online, there's something like 2,000 quid, And it's like they were infamous for recording their own internal workings. So I've caught many things on audio that are very, very weird, very strange. And I would say I've caught more audio phenomena, to go back to and to hit your question with a direct answer. I've recorded more anomalies on paranormal investigations that are down to audio than I ever have on video, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Do you think there's any reason for that? I just think if we assume it's an attempt at communication, or
that's a very that almost is asking me if I believe in ghosts. Do I think it's direct communication? In many instances, again, I'll go back to that location, Stocksbridge, because it's famous. And the reason to say this is because people can look it up and find out the type of phenomena that is reported. We'd been there on many occasions, and we went there and left an audio recorder, digital audio recorder. Now there's another location just down the road that's also worth having a look at. So we did, but left this recorder in place, and we started off to the other one for a couple of hours. When we come back, luckily the people in South Yorkshire, they're very, very friendly. They didn't steal the equipment. Obviously, they didn't find it really, but I like to think they were being kind. Anyway, we managed to, we retrieved this digital recorder, took it back, and sure enough, on playing it back, there's hours and hours of the sound of the cars going along the bypass in the distance, and that's it. And then at one point, and it must have been a 2 or 3 second clip, what sounds like children singing, very briefly, very faintly. And it would have coincided with when we set it up by about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And if you know the location and you know where Stocksbridge is, the only type of sound you get were the clanging from the steelworks, from Chorus Steelworks in Stocksbridge, because of Sheffield, Sheffield Steel and that. But sounds from the town wouldn't carry across. You just wouldn't get sound. You wouldn't hear voices from the town. They just wouldn't carry across the valley. It was too far away. We never ever heard that ever. We could sit there for hours and we would never hear it with ourselves. And loads of other recordings never ever picked up any other voices coming across the valley from the actual town itself. On top of which, the distance. So you're in quite a remote location on the side of a hill, in complete darkness. Apart from the people going up there to play as the Ghostbusters theme like you did, you don't really get people hanging around up there. But we got children's voices. And on another occasion, and this is a few years later now, because after hearing the children's voices, I'm sorry, Jay, after hearing the children's voices, we've done a little bit more of a little bit more research on that. And that is one of the big things that people would experience would be not just seeing this monk, which would appear actually at the side of people when they're driving down the bypass, in the passage. Shit, there'd be a monk sat in the car, or a monk fritting around in the fields, or a monk actually stood on the bridge, P-Ride Bridge at the bypass. The other main thing would be hearing children's voices. And that's what sort of started everything off, because some workmen, when they were building the bypass itself, heard what sounded like children singing Ringa Ringa Roses, which that's everybody do look it up online. Look it up online, everybody. You'll find the story, but that's what started it. So many years later, we've gone back again and done it, and I'm recording, because I'm in the passenger seat at this time. I'm recording with the video camera, and we've gone off P-Ride Lane into the valley where the steelworks are, to come back up the hill towards where the town itself is of Stocksbridge. And I thought, well, nothing's going to happen now. So we turned off the video camera. As soon as we hit the brow onto the main road with the windows open, we heard ourselves, not on the recording, we actually heard Ringa Ringa Roses, children singing a song, all of us in the car, because the windows were down, all of us. And I had stopped recording about 2 or 3 seconds before it. So beyond a shadow of a doubt, that's just one, but there's been many, many, many experiences. So I think a lot of the time you just catch in audio that's imprinted upon the environment when the conditions are right, just like the stone tape theory. In them instances, I don't think that was actual communication. However, I have conducted many sessions where you've used an audio recorder for what we call and response, is to ask a question, leave it recording with a big enough space, and then play it back and see if you get anything. And on many, many occasions, it's sounded like...
I've heard some very, very creepy responses. Sometimes it's just noise, and then somebody says, is somebody saying, "I hate you," or God knows what. And then you're like, "Oh no, no, I can hear that now."
Yeah,
but I've
stay
always
away from
that's
that.
a bit of
auto suggestion. Auto suggestion. Yeah. You've got to be. There's many things you've got to be aware of, which is auto-suggestion, autokinesis, kinematics, and motion parallax, as well as tribal luminescence. They're like the 5 main things you need to watch out for when you are conducting paranormal investigation, because they are very normal things that we perceive. This is a sensory perception thing that most paranormal investigators aren't even aware of. I've said them 5, and I'm not saying everybody, because that's being judgmental, but I'm just wondering how many people have even know what them 5 things are.
I don't know what 4 of them are.
you've got to be massively aware of that when you're doing paranormal investigation.
Well,
but in answer to your
through.
question, pardon?
Go through.
Well,
I don't know what a few of them
auto-suggestion.
are. So
Okay.
I know what
Okay.
but yeah.
Yeah, you know what auto-suggestion is. Basically, that's more important when you are interviewing somebody or asking somebody questions about the thing that they experienced, if you like. So, for instance, would be to say, if you know, what did you see? Oh, I saw a disc, or rather, tell us what you experienced. What happened? Tell me what happened. And somebody says, well, I saw a flying disc. So I'll use UFO example. I saw a flying disc. It was spinning. It had lights on it. And we watched it for a couple of minutes and then it went away. Now, auto-suggestion would be for me to say, and how loud was the noise? Or what sound did it make? Because the person didn't actually mention anything about a sound. That is me automatically suggesting that there was a sound and imprinting that false memory upon their short-term memory or on their recollection.
It's a thing. Police have to be very careful when they're interviewing people, but also like things like psychologists have to be very aware that if they're treating somebody, that they're not imprinting suggestions completely accidentally, filling in the gaps for the patient by accident, because it's very easy to do, because we ask open questions. It's how we talk to people sometimes, but in doing that you can put words in their mouth, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You really have to be careful about doing that, as you just said. So auto-suggestion is actual massive one. Kinematics are basically seeing things or having the illusion of seeing things just due to false perspective, which happens a lot, and it mainly happens a lot in peripheral vision.
Yeah,
your peripheral vision is going to be the big one, and especially at the night time. Your eyes, the way that it gathers lights. You got rods, you got cones, and the way that your eyes work dictate that you're not infallible. Your eyes aren't infallible. You can have 20/20 vision, but your eyes are not infallible. Your peripheral vision you can see all sorts of things. You can see mists because of the way that you can get bits of floaters in your eyes, and dogs. It happens to dogs a lot, and that's why a lot of dogs will bark into the corner of a room or stare at the corner of a room for a long time. Doesn't necessarily mean it's haunted, folks, but you will get that kind of thing. So auto-suggestion, you got kinematics. The other thing,
is that also going to be partly that like our brains are programmed to identify certain shapes?
That's mainly your pareidolia would sort of come into that as well in a way. But kinematics is more seeing motion, seeing motion because of usually because you're focused upon one thing. It's and motion parallax is where it appears things are either moving or things are staying still because either you're moving or your viewpoint moves. Now, this is massively important when it comes to UFOs. If you're sat on a plane and you see an object and you're moving along and that object looks like it isn't moving at all, that kind of thing, it's due to the relative speed that you are, distance and angle from that object. It's not because it's actually floating in the sky, so you've got that kind of thing. Autokinesis is if you stare, I'll give you an example. If you stare at a star for long enough, twinkling star, it will appear to wobble.
Yep.
It will appear to wobble as your eyes and the muscles in your eyes strain to maintain focus on a distant object that's only small. So you've got to be. There's so many things.
It moves quite a lot, doesn't it? It can be very odd. It can move look like it's moving a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fifth one, triboluminescence, is basically gases that are igniting due to the compression of stone and materials, geological composition of the floor, where it's almost rubbing. So it sort of destroys itself and creates pockets of gas that can then be illuminated. So when people say that they're seeing spirit sparks or vortices and things like that, a lot of the times it's the result of triboluminescence, which is if you're in a location, it makes sense to do it, have an understanding of the geological and topographical composite of the area that you're in. Because if you're in a limestone and things like that, you are susceptible towards experience what's called tribal luminescence. The information's on the internet for everybody in the side chat if you want to look it up, because a lot of people aren't aware of that. But tribal luminescence is the fifth one. That's I'm trying to be quick, and that's a brief, a really quick brief overview of it.
I'd never heard of 4 of those. Actually, when you explain it, it's just, it's very. I completely sad. I just never heard it described like that before. It's fascinating. How much do you think psychology comes into, particularly when people misinterpret what they're seeing? Because I was saying, I was reading a thing today about going on ghost hunting. It always said, don't go alone, go in groups. And my first thing was like, yeah, somebody's going to go, shadow! And everyone's going to freak out. And, because people do. I mean, it's a good example is like, you can go and see a comedian. Honestly, I've got a point, honest. You can go see a comedian that's normally you don't find very funny. But when you're in a big group of people, you'll laugh your arse off, watching it live all the way through. You can watch the DVD later and then go, this isn't funny. Why do I think this was funny when I saw it live? It's because as a species, we copy each other and we behave like that. So, I mean, we're social creatures at the end of the day.
Yeah. Group conformity.
Yeah. So if one person...
Sorry, Jay.
No, I think it's the same with the UFOs. I'm not picking on Stephen Greer, but I'm going to a little bit. When he's done some of his CE5 things, he'll go, look at the alien, look at the alien. And everyone else is there going, is that a flare? No, it's not a flare, it's an alien. Everyone goes, oh, no, he's right, it is an alien. So, I mean, that particularly when it's somebody in a respect or authority figure says things like that, we tend to, follow. So, I think how much
of it is psychology, are you saying?
How much of a concern is the psychology when you're trying to do an investigation?
I think, Steve, if you want to give what you think about that before I start going on a rant.
I think it has a lot to do with what people experience. I, for one, have an ex-partner that I did a few investigations with, and she was very had to be centre of attention, if that makes sense, and everything seemed to happen to her, like getting prodded in the back, seeing things, feeling unwell, feeling drowsy, tired, or sick, and when nothing else was happening to anybody else, and it wasn't something that I was aware of, if that makes sense. I was thinking, why are you coming out with all this stuff now? And clearly, nothing was happening. It also, if you're going on the ghost investigation and it's already imprinted in your mind, but it's going to be spooky. Something most probably is going to happen. Not that it always does, but that's 90% of people, I would say, get that thought in their head. Hello. So they're ready for something to happen, if that makes sense. But they're looking for it to happen, and any little thing, flipping a moth coming by and hitting him in the head.
Oh yeah, breathing in your neck or something.
Yeah. I was touched, I was pushed, this, that, and the other. But you have to be, just like we were saying before with the UFO things and stuff like that. You have to take everything with a pinch of salt and then weigh up the evidence on both sides and think logically of what it could have been or what the situation is. And I think obviously the bigger the group that you're with, you're going to get more hysteria. You're going to get more people agreeing with other people, like we were saying a minute ago. It's a very, like, you always get people saying that things happen to them all the time. It probably doesn't. It's probably their emotional state where they are inside their head, and possibly thinking also that it gives them something to sort of hold on to, if that makes sense. something to sort of not live
People
for.
feel important.
Yeah,
They feel important,
yeah,
aren't they? 'Cause I've got ghost stories.
I'm getting.
I always think about that with aliens and things. When I research alien stories, it's always you'll see somebody that's seen something extraordinary. Oh my god, that's amazing! And then when they're interviewed, they start talking about other times they saw aliens and other times they saw. And then as soon as I think, I'm like, oh no, I thought this was interesting, and now you just sound like a nutter. But anyway, okay.
In many cases, I've been tempted to conduct my own kind of experiments, because no questions, please. We won't be dragged off course.
Tammy, ask us again at the end.
Yeah, we'll come to that one. Would be to suggest something at a location, and I've done this. And should any of the people that have been on investigations with me in the past see this, yeah, I've caught you out. And that will be to suggest something. And it can be something very simple. It really can. Did you hear that? That sounded like somebody growling or something growling. And I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it at all. I said that I heard it just to see if anybody would conform. Yeah, I did. It sounded like a woman. So what? And he didn't. I didn't call him out on it. I just left it because let's see how far this will go. Let's see if it will spread, whether the hysteria will spread, and whether the group conformity thing will spread. And sure enough, it did. Just like dominoes. Yeah, I heard it too. Yeah, I heard it too. Yeah, it come from over there. So it went from me making it up to somebody saying, yeah, I heard it, to somebody saying, yeah, it was actually a female, and to somebody saying, yeah, it was actually a female over there. And then to top it all off, I thought it must have been a female because I thought I saw a woman walk past that doorway. So it's
fascinating thing to try. Poke the bear. See what
I've done it a lot, brother. Done it a lot. Trust me, I really have. And does psychology play a massive part of it? I would say psychology is 99% the paranormal, really. And that's not going to win me any friends, but I'm not bothered about that because it's the truth. 99% of it is psychological. Look at it like this. If there is something truly going on and people are having genuine experiences, that's worth investigating. Yeah. If people are making things up because let's just arbitrarily call them liars or fantasists, and they want that kind of attention within a group setting, psychologically, that's worth investigating. If people are saying they've experienced things just because they're imagining things and they're not being deceptive about it, that's worth investigating. You know what I mean? Yeah. If it's down to normally prosaic and scientific phenomena that we're not yet aware of, that's worth investigating. So whichever way you look at it, it's worth investigating. It is worth looking into.
It's worth understanding.
To understand it. But the thing is, it would be a person had an experience at a location and that story spread, which is why we've heard of it in the first place, for people to go there and investigate. So somebody had an experience. So it's down to their perception and recollection, which will drive the legend or drive the folklore or drive the narrative of the investigation or location that you happen to be conducting or be at. So psychology, massive part of it, if not all of it.
I mean, I stand to think, like, we've got things like cognitive bias, and we've got things, but I mean, there's an effect to the way the brain works, and that it cuts corners constantly. We can't process all the information that we absorb through our eyes and our senses and everything else that's going on in your brain. So your brain is constantly cutting corners. There's loads of little. You can go online and do little experiments on this. That it's like when you read a sentence, you're constantly actually always sort of reading ahead subconsciously, and you will assume it. And a lot of people will read, like, say, a black cab walked down the thing, but people read it as black cat. And 99% of the time, people will read black cat and say it out loud, sort of thing. And it's because your brain isn't really 100% focusing on that. It's constantly cutting corners. It constantly goes, oh, I know this, black. It'll be a cat. Move on, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But your brain does that when you're talking. How many times have you sort of thought you've recognized somebody from a distance, and you get closer and think, "Oh, no, it's not them," and even it goes as far as like waving or something. They go, "Oh God, it's the wrong person," because your brain has just gone, "Oh, that looks a bit like that. That'll be that person."
I did that
It's
the other
because
day.
our brain constantly categorizes things because it has to make assumptions, or it can't think about everything that we see, so it has to constantly make assumptions. Unfortunately, a side effect of that is things like sexism and racism and and all these other isms, because we make assumptions constantly about things.
The thing is it's
Remember how much that is.
cognitive bias. Cognitive bias. Sorry, Jay. While it also so it sort of also can be inhibiting, is also there to protect us in a way, because it does aid memory. It does aid long-term memory, especially. And embellishment is a human condition. So somebody can be completely telling the truth, but 10 years later after the event, they've slightly embellished it because it helps them to remember it. You will remember a story. Now, a lot of people remember emotionally rather than factually. They remember emotionally because it's the emotions that they feel at the time that are so strong that sort of imprints upon their memory more than in most cases more than the facts, which is why, as you know yourself, and as Steve does, and everybody in the side chat, you can have 5 witnesses to a car crash, and every single one might give a slightly different interpretation of what actually occurred. That kind of thing will be there, but there'll be little differences because of perception and mood and all the rest of it. But for the most part, cognitive bias does help us in that. If when we embellish and when we elaborate upon things, we remember it better when we tell it as a story, when there is a narrative to it, because that helps us then recollect an emotive state to put us back into an emotional state, which then serves the narrative when we're putting it out to other people. So we become emotional when we describe it because we will recollect those feelings that we had at that time. So embellishment and adding to a certain story, it helps us tell the story at a later date. And the further back in time that the event was, the more embellishment there is in the present to help explain or facilitate the delivery of the event or telling of the event. So cognitive bias, it can inhibit us as a species, but it also serves us as well. Yeah,
it definitely is a good, like I say, shortcut for processing, which helps the brain immensely. It's one of the reasons why AI, artificial intelligence, is so difficult, because programming shortcuts basically is quite hard. Computers really struggle with it. It's one of the reasons why AI. It's one of the ways. It's one of the things they've tried to do more in the last few years, is to try and get the software to work more like the human brain. I was going to say as well that one of the things is memory doesn't work like a videotape. So we don't record things in like streams. And if you if you go on a holiday when you're a kid and you go on the same holiday 5 or 6 times, your brain just goes, "Oh, I don't need to record that. I can just record that holiday and I can just tag, we went twice, we went 3," which is why sometimes it's quite hard to try and figure out which holiday you did something specific, is because your brain doesn't bother saving it. It just goes, "Well, I did that 5 times." That sort of thing. The way the brain works is incredible, and that's only the 20% we understand. There's 80% of the brain we have no clue, and we don't know what we don't know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So understanding it and trying to figure out how these things work is just it's impossible because we don't understand it. But I do wonder whether a lot of paranormal investigation is things like how we see patterns in things, because our brains are constantly programmed to look for certain patterns. So when we see a shadow in a certain shape, we think it's a person. How many times we woke up in the middle of the night and your bloody coat's on the back of a door or something, you're sure there's somebody stood there, and then you're fucking hell, and then it's just my dressing gown sort of thing.
Yeah, pareidolia.
Yeah, that's a good word. I've not heard that before either. So there you go.
Yeah, pareidolia.
I'm learning.
Making shapes.
Pareidolia is a big one. Yeah.
The thing is, and hearing things is apophenia, by the way. Making sense of sound. Yes, you got visually it's pareidolia, audibly it's apophenia. One of the first things, the first thing that we see when we're born is our mother's face. We recognize that as being safe. We recognize that as being something that we can associate with. So that's right there. Put right in there. That's right in the data banks, that right from dot. We also, at a base level, when it comes to developing as a species, would be able to differentiate between threats and something that may be perceived as being friendly by its outline and by its shape as well. Being able to identify predators. The reason, I'll give an example here. The reason that they would give spotters during the Second World War just the silhouettes and outline of aircraft wasn't just because there was a good chance you might not get a clear look at it. It's because you're more likely to remember the basic shape and outline and silhouette of something. It's easier to remember that than it is every single bit of color, the camouflage pattern, the numbers that are on it, all that kind of thing. If I was to say, yeah, exactly. So if you're going to see a car that's going to drive off, you're going to, what's the number plate and all that? It's easy if somebody said, well, it was a red car. I remember seeing a red car. There was a red car. It was big, and it drove off down the road, and it hit that other car. It was green. It's easier to remember that. So we sort of like we're predisposed towards associating things with comforting. What would you call it? What do you call it? Well-known things that we can relate to.
Things that we're comfortable with, things that trigger our perception as well. And things.
So pareidolia is massive in the paranormal, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
One of the things think about working in groups, because like I say, I just Googled paranormal investigation today, because Google is basically where I get all my information from. I'd be thick as a pig shit if it wasn't for Google. And you only ever look at the first page of Google. Never go to the second page. That's where all the evil lies. But one of the websites I found basically was talking about always go in a group because you don't know what sort of ghost you're going to come into contact with. It might be a scary ghost. You could be at risk. Have you ever come across anything that's genuine? Sorry,
who's writing these rules?
I know. Well, I actually think they were trying to sell me something. But anyway, we'll move on. It read like a travel agent. It read like, like go on these things, and it's like, like a travel agent would tell you about Malta and how amazing Malta is or something. How amazing ghost hunting is. And then, people love a risk. But is there, have you ever come across anything that you considered, we're actually at risk here? Or is that just, again, TV bullshit?
I'll let you go first again, Steve, before I start with that one.
He's going to rant again.
Mm-hmm.
Settle in.
I've had experiences where and obviously know people, other people that have had experiences where they feel threatened by what they're experiencing, and even before they experience something. So again, it sort of goes back to how your emotional state is, or if there's a lot of energy in that area as well. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm going to let Dave take this one, just right. Because it for me,
the way we perceive things depends where you're coming from, doesn't it? I mean, that's like when you read a text and sometimes you think the person's angry at you, or they think the person's being cheeky with you, or it depends on your perception. It comes from inside you, doesn't it? So,
exactly.
I understand that point.
Yeah. Go, Dave.
Okay. Well, I would say, it's wise to not go on your own for a couple of reasons, really. I mean, one of them is because the main one is if you have any kind of experience, it's important to have somebody there just because they can possibly corroborate your experience too.
Yeah.
There is somebody there who can say, that's absolutely right. Yes, we've discussed the fact that they might see it different. We cognitive bias, but there is a good chance that they're going to have a very similar experience which will corroborate your own. If you're going to be walking around abandoned buildings or things, you want to do it just because of safety. If anything else,
we've all seen that casualty.
We've all been there, yeah. When the aeroplane flies into the hospital. Might have been a bit thinking that one, but anyway,
helicopters flying to that fucking hospital every other week.
Absolutely, it was brilliant for that. And the other one would be I was involved in it. I'm not going to name them. I think they've gone bust, but I'm not going to name them anyway. It's just wise that I don't. But I have been involved in events companies in the past. What I've done paranormal tours and and paranormal investigations, and you see like 75 people walking around a location in groups of 10, so they spread out all over the place. And of course you've got somebody going, you can hear banging. Of course you can hear fecking banging. There's like 65 people in the floor above you. Of course you're going to hear banging. Absolutely. You know, so I sort of get both sides of it. You know, the pros and cons of it. It comes to a residential investigation, it's good if there's just 2 or 3 of you. Usually we would go in a pair. If it's an outside location, obviously depending upon the size of it and depending what kind of equipment you're taking. I mean, if you're taking, you know, you want to take, like, say for instance K2s. Yeah, I'll give you an example here. Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I mean? You need bodies to use the equipment if you know, you're using a lot of equipment.
Yeah.
So that massively depends. So stay away from page 2 of Google. I massively agree with that, because it's complete and utter horse radish. That you're being told there. Is it there because of certain ghosts? Right. Well, I will go on this. As far as I'm concerned, right, a ghost is a non-sentient, non-interactive energy that is imprinted upon an environment or a location that replays a preset certain of events in sequence when the conditions are right. Yeah. That is it.
Stuck in a loop. Okay.
Absolutely. A spirit is a completely different thing, in my opinion. And not just my opinion, lots of other people's opinions too. A spirit is a sentient energy that can be interacted within its environment. Whether it's aware of your presence or not is open to conjecture. In some instances possibly, in others no. But it's a completely different thing. A spirit is a sentient interactive energy. So it's completely different. You start getting into the realms of what kinds of spirits and what kinds of entities can be responsible for activity within certain locations as to whether or not you're in potential danger. And yeah, I'm not going to list them, but people will know of these. There's a few, isn't there? Obviously, you've got poltergeists, you've got waifs, you've got succubi and various other kinds of demons. If you want to go into demonology, I will say this for the people that are into demonology. Demonology walks hand in hand with theology. So without religion, you don't really have the demons.
Yeah,
you can fight amongst yourselves for that one. But I'm just saying.
Right.
Just saying.
People are telling me aliens are demons. That's right.
Now, that isn't to argue the fact that there might be interdimensional or transdimensional beings or energies that can interact. I didn't say that. It's just the label that we give them. We label certain energies or entities as being demons that walks hand in hand with a relevant place within religion, and each religion will have its own. That's why there's different demons all over the world. Okay, but that's about as much as I'm going to cover it. Give me a call if you want to know more. But when it's down to
I'm basically Catholic. I'm completely on board with demons.
There you go then. There you go then. Have I ever been in a situation where that anything has happened that could be considered dangerous? Yes.
Yeah,
I have to say yes. I have to say yes to that. And there was fairly recently. I've been marked. I've been what has felt like being pushed by what I don't know, but like being pushed, being scratched. What the feeling of being bitten, being burnt, having all my energy drained from my body in a particular place after hearing that it's going to happen on a spirit box, and then a spirit box, and then going from that location and feeling instantly okay, and I've had things thrown at me, absolutely.
We were saying that we should go on an investigation. I've changed my mind.
You'll love it. It'll be brilliant. It would be fantastic.
I can go to work and get the crap kicked out of me. I work in mental health, by the way. It's not just generally. I don't just generally have people attacking me, but sometimes. But yeah, Baz was talking about his last investigation. 3 cracked ribs. Come on, Baz, you get heal. Go again. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it.
Absolutely. No, sorry, James. Sorry, man. I keep interrupting.
No,
the thing about personal experience and equipment, because I do want to tie the two together, because it's easy for us to segue because we're humans, and we get emotional about the conversation, we get into it and all that. But I do want to sort of tie a couple of things together because, with the premise of the stream and what you've said, I think it's only right.
Go for it.
Would be if you have a personal experience, there could be lots of reasons why you experience certain phenomena. So data logging, I'm big fan of what you would call, using data loggers, which is pretty new. And I will use a data logger if you like. I'll show a basic data logger, or a data logger will be the EDI, which will record humidity, it will record barometric pressure, it will record ground vibration, temperature, as well as electromagnetic energy. And it will record it, like I say, which you can then use in its own program, or I think it's in Microsoft Excel. And you will get a graph. So say, for instance, at 11:01 p.m., you experience what consider you thought you saw something walk across a room. Let's say you captured what looked a little bit. You captured what looked like something moving across a doorway. You check your data logger, and at that exact time, there was a change in humidity. There was a change in barometric pressure. The temperature dropped. You're getting ground vibration. We call them geophones. It's measuring ground vibration or vibrations through solid objects or whatever, but it's basically a geophone. And you also get a change in electromagnetic energy. Then you've got 5, if you like, scientific, I use the term loosely, measurements or readings to corroborate the video recording you've got as well. Rather than just a bit of a grainy image and a personal experience. You'll have the personal experience, the grainy image, and 5 scientifically measured, if you like. You got it measured on instrumentation. I would say scientifically, I think it's only sort of calibrated to itself. So you would use it, in relation to the baseline within the environment, rather than saying that 0 on this particular device is an absolute 0. You can't read things like that, because that kind of equipment's going to cost thousands of pounds, really, proper scientific equipment. But that if it said 0 and it doesn't say 0 anymore, it's now saying 2, say, for instance, then in accordance to itself, it's moved from the baseline, if that makes any sense. So when you've got
things, is what you're saying, is that there's been a change of some sort. You might not, I'm not with you on that. And corroborating evidence is really the point. I mean, I've written here that what is good evidence is a question I'd like to take. What evidence can we dismiss? And I think that's the point, isn't it? Is no evidence isn't necessarily, you don't dismiss anything. You're trying to, it's bits of a jigsaw, but it's with evidence that you can corroborate with something else. Is that what you're trying to do?
He's good, this Jamie guy. I will say the reason that orbs were so popular in the 1990s is because nobody had a clue what they were, and you've got digital stills photography is pretty much in its infancy, and it's the inability of the sensors, which usually IRC or crop sensor type cameras that you're using, is the inability of the sensor to resolve the image due to parallax. So. Basically what I'm saying there is we're not using film, we're not using emulsion or silver halide to record things. Now magnetic tape, we're using sensors, aren't we? CMOS chips and stuff like that, or CCD devices, and it can't render that image into sharp focus, only the image that it's focused upon. So you get parallax issues, which means that very small things, and people couldn't wrap their head around this, will be very small things like dust, vapor, little bits of fibers,
Those
small
little
insects.
natty little buggery things that fly around and
Absolutely. And when they reflect the light back, so back to the source and obviously back to the medium which is recording, they just look like balls of light. Now, I got pretty damn good at one time at being able to tell you what orb was what by the way that it looked. It's like if it's a water droplet, you can sort of tell because it looks like it's got a crispy shell, a bit like an M&M. If it's an insect, you can sort of tell because it's got like a dot in the middle and then the blurriness around the edges.
Sometimes
If it's
like spinning, don't they? They look like it's spinning, but it's the wings flapping.
You can sort of tell what kind of, and then you get like actual, if you like, what you would consider to be sort of like real orbs, which are small balls of what appear to be energy or plasma that we're unsure what they are. Now, I am more inclined to believe an orb is worth looking at if it meets two criteria. One is you see it with a naked eye as well, and two, you record it. You can record it, so it's corroborated your personal experience, and you see it with the naked eye. And I suppose the third would be, if you do, if you do manage to get a photograph of it, would be to take a photograph on 35 mil, or 110. So you're recording it on emulsion rather than using a sensor, like a charged coupled device sensor or something like that.
Yeah. That's just, something actually detects the light. I remember I saw a moth once on using low light camera, and I generally thought we were being attacked by something that's like a foot. We were all ready to go out and kill it. You're like, Jesus Christ! But actually, as soon as we sort of like, oh no, it's just like that big. It's like, we're okay, guys. But we were like, right, get your pitchforks. We're in trouble here, guys. We've got to go.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's it.
But no, that's interesting. So. If we try to pull it all together, then using all the different technologies and things, Dave, well, you sort of like touched on it earlier. Do you believe in ghosts? It sounds like you believe in ghosts and spirits, and even have a rough idea what they are. Do you think you've ever gathered evidence that would convince me?
No, and I'll tell you why. It's like, for the non-believer, no evidence is possible, and for the believer, no evidence is necessary. And until there's an absolute, I'm not in a position, or anybody else, to present anything that will convince you otherwise until you have an experience that you yourself cannot explain. Now, I can take a photograph when I'm on holiday, and I can explain to you how much of a good time I had. But that photograph isn't going to convey that to you. It isn't going to convey the emotion. It isn't going to convey the moment. You're just going to see a still image, a snapshot in time with which to judge how you can relate to my personal experience from that. Now,
that's a good way.
I've got so much equipment, Jay, so much equipment, so much of it, and I cannot empirically say that one piece of it is capable of proving anything whatsoever. Because it isn't. On its own, they're worth nothing. They're of no use. They're of no consequence. When you use them in collaboration with in the correct intent and the correct application, they become very useful tools. Now, for me, when it comes to paranormal investigation and using technology, using tech, the vast majority of it is actually to be far from gathering what people would consider to be evidence, is to debunk the normal. Now, we'll touch upon this slightly because I think a lot of people sort of lose sight of this. And I'll use the good old famous K2 meter. I've got lots of VMF meters, a ridiculous amount actually. I probably need help. Okay, but the K2 meter. It's a single axis meter, okay? So wherever you point it, you're going to take the reading from. That is it, but one direction only. And it measures AC, which is man-made. It's man-made electrical energy. People forget that. Now, living things have a small amount of DC electrical energy, not AC. Natural electrical energy is DC. It's not AC. We use what we call bridge rectifiers and diodes, capacitors, things like that, to create AC current. It's man-made energies. It's not natural. But people will get a reading on a K2 meter in a location. It'll flash. It couldn't possibly down to the fact that there's a taxi rank a couple of miles down the road, but we won't go into that.
Cables or electrical cables underground, or
which is what these are used for. When you go on a paranormal investigation, these are to find possible prosaic explanations for errant or stray electromagnetic energy fields that might be affecting people's brainwave patterns, which will give them the same kind of thing as the God helmet. Okay, you can do a similar kind of thing by autosuggestion. If you use a tri-field or a tri-axis DC meter, however, this measures DC electrical energy. This is what 200. What it says, about 200 quid or something like that. You're looking at about 200 quid for something like that. About 30-40 quid for a K2 meter. But if you're getting big spikes on a DC meter in corroboration with other things that are happening, then that's worth looking into. That's worth paying attention to. But beyond that, all you've had is an electromagnetic spike. That is all. When you've had a flash on that, you see, they can go off because of any reason whatsoever. And the amount of time I've seen people chasing lights, So EMF readers for me means nothing. Another one is, measuring temperature drops. You need it to be measuring ambient temperature, thermobaric energy. Okay. And if you're getting a change in ambient temperature, that's worth paying attention to, especially if it's isolated, localized, extreme, sudden. Okay. They actually work on magnetic, electric, and radio, Baz. It's the tri-field. That's why there's three of them. But there's also tri-axis as well. And this thing is one of these. Everybody's got one of these. Now, this is a contact. This measures contact or surface temperature. But everybody's flying it about. So unless the ghost is or whatever you want to call it, the spirit is actually living inside my Xbox over there right now. If I take a measurement of the heat from that Xbox, I'm talking complete bollocks. It doesn't mean anything at all, but everybody's got them. So you should be measuring, surface temperature, ambient temperature. And like I said, unless it's localized, sudden and extreme, it's not really paying attention to anyway, because you've got to isolate drafts. There's all sorts of things that you've got to go into. Motion sensors. There's loads of it. There's so much of it. Crystals. People have all sorts of it. Crystals, absolutely crystals, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I was forced to. I'm not a big fan of crystals. But again, it's coming from a place of no knowledge whatsoever. So, I remember my mom was doing a massage course, and she asked me to go and help, and because they were doing the tests sort of thing, so they needed people. So I said, Mom, I'll help you out as long as you don't actually give me a massage, because that would be creepy. And she promised me I wouldn't, and then I got there and she went, nobody else wants you, I've got to do it. So Mum was massaging me, and then at one point she brought out some crystals and started aligning my chakra, and I go, "That's it, I'm done. Get off me." So, hot rock massage actually was lovely, but it was very creepy having my mum touch me. I don't understand why crystals are relevant. Why they? What do you get? What sort of results can a crystal give you? Or...
We're all a composition of element, molecules, and energy.
Yeah.
Okay, where we all exist, and everything exists on different vibrational frequencies. So the difference between solids, gases, liquids, so on and so forth, is how sparsely populated, how violently it's moving, and obviously the atomical construct. And so that's no different than anything else. And every solid's acts like a solid, and so on and so forth. But the different crystals is the actual composition of these crystals affect the energy or the frequency, not only in the environment, but within us as well, because we're composed of that. The same way that electromagnetic energy can have an influence on us, where we can see things, where we can have experiences, where we can think we can hear something, or we thought we saw something, or we feel nauseous because there's high levels of electromagnetic energy. We're not seeing it, We don't actually we see it. We feel the results of it. Again, I'm loosely speaking here. And it's the same thing with crystals, like the different crystals, because they resonate at different frequencies, interact with our vibrational frequencies, and can directly affect our well-being. And not just our energies, but other energies that are in the environment. So in a paranormal sense, certain crystals will be used to generate what would be considered positive energy, and to attract or repel what might be considered negative energy. So people will use crystals for that within paranormal investigation. Have I used them and seen the benefit of doing so? Am I sort of cutting you off at the pass by asking that, I wonder? My answer to that would be, don't ask me that question, please. I think, because I think you sort of like, you think, well, this is a clear quartz crystal shard. This generates like good juju, man. You know, this protects me against some seriously twisted mojo. You know what I mean? So if you've already got that in your head, we've already discussed auto-suggestion and preconception, haven't we? So
you should have took that when you were attacked. Idiot.
What am I thinking? I did. That's the thing, you see. You know, I had all sorts of. There's other ones as well. It's but like, you know, jet black, your black stuff. So like obsidian. Obsidian's obsidian's a good stone, and so's jet and black tourmaline. A lot of paranormal investigators will use them because they repel negative energies. Unless you know, I'm sure other paranormal investigators will say they repel negative demons and ghosts. I say they help balance certain energies, is my belief. Yeah. I don't label things like other folk. But I did have it with me, but it's is it because it didn't work? Did it protect me from being harmed even more?
You could have been killed.
Could have been killed.
See, I say I don't believe in these things, and I don't really, if I'm 100% honest. But this stuff is like ancient. This knowledge is ancient, and I think there are things that we understood 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 5,000 that I can't explain. You know, I hear a lot of these old wives' tales, and then they turn out to be true. You know, it's like you know. But at the end of the day, these crystals have been used for a very long time. I think our bodies and our senses are far more capable than mainstream science believes.
Absolutely.
I think we can detect electromagnetic fields. And it could be, you know, you hear that thing when you think there's somebody behind you, and maybe you've heard them and not quite conscious of it. But I actually genuinely believe maybe you're aware of them because you can like feel their magnetic field and your magnetic field, and it affects it. And
just because you're paranoid doesn't mean you're not being followed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, exactly. But I mean, scientifically speaking, pigeons can see magnetic fields. And they reckon we've got the same iron filings in our eyes that pigeons have. We just don't use it. So I'm like, well, do we not use it, or are we just not maybe as conscious of it? So I would it wouldn't surprise me at all if somebody did some sort of experiment and was able to evidence that actually we can detect electromagnetic fields on some sort of subconscious level. And maybe some people are a little bit more in tune to that than others.
I think you've touched on a good point there.
Yeah, I think so.
I've always sort of thought that myself. I mean, this will be this is a good one, because you start of in ways when it comes to trying to explain your experiences or validating your experiences, if you like proving what you saw or experienced, you start to get into absolutes, which is nice in the paranormal field because you normally don't get them, but negative absolutes in a way. And I'll give you an example. Now, if I said to you that I had an experience where I've done a particular investigation in a residential property where most of the activities seem to be centered around the child's bedroom, and when we were conducting a few little experiments. I'm not going to tell you guys what we're doing, so don't ask. I will really one day. But we were doing experiments like that. It's part of the course during the investigation. And there was a truck, a toy truck in the middle of the room. The three of us sat in the room watching at the time. And the truck rolled across the floor on its own into the skirting board, right? And it completely disappeared.
Yeah, I'd leave at that point.
It completely
That's it. I'm
disappeared.
convinced.
We had no idea where it went.
Yeah.
2 hours later, we'd shifted location, done all sorts of things during that time frame, and we'd heard noises in the kitchen. So we went into the kitchen, and this toy truck was right in the center of the kitchen floor, and
Jesus Christ,
the kitchen's directly beneath the child's bedroom. So either I'm lying or it happened.
You're lying.
Do you know what I mean? That's fine. I have no problem with you believing that.
I believe. I think I said this once to Steve, actually, that I believe you believe. But that's a bit different, because that's sort of like, that's not you saying that I felt something or I saw something. That's a physical object moving across a room, disappearing from a physical location and reappearing in another. I don't even see how that could be a hoax.
That is absolutely what all of us saw. That is absolutely what all of us saw, which is exactly the same. Which is exactly the same as when you're in a location what's reported poltergeistic type activity, where cupboard doors are opening and shutting in the kitchen, and knives and spoons stuff is sliding across the work surfaces, and where you can walk out of the room to go into another part of the house, and then go back into the kitchen, and the cups have been taken off the cup tree or the mug tree, whatever it's called, and they're stacked up in the center of the floor. And you were the only people in the house. Now, this is where you're also hearing voices coming from within that room. You're hearing scratching, you're hearing scraping, you're hearing banging on the wall. You see, the door. It's so difficult to explain the actual experience, because I could have gone back into that kitchen and took a photograph of them mugs stacked up, and all you're seeing is a stack of mugs. And as far as you're concerned, I could have done that.
That's that line in Ghostbusters, isn't it? When they come across the stack of books, because I guess no human being would stack books like this.
So evidence is always at the mercy of whether people believe whether it's evidence or not, unfortunately.
And yeah, but I don't need to prove it, because again,
just to cut in there.
Go on, Steve.
My experience with excuse me, on investigations and things like that, is that if you do hear a sound, or a tapping or a knocking, to me anyway, it doesn't sound like a real normal tap or knock.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. It sounds
it does. Really, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, really bizarre.
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, and in that instance, you know that it's not somebody doing a normal knock or something like that, because it has something to it that isn't made by somebody, if that makes sense.
It's the hairs on the back of your neck type of thing. There's just, there's something weird, but you don't necessarily know what it is.
It almost sounds like it's there, but it's not. It's somewhere else.
It sounds like it's in the very fibers of the structure of the place that you're at.
Yeah.
You sort of, I really know exactly what he's saying. It's like when Steve gave an example, and he knocked, you could sort of hear the impact of his knuckles as well as the knock, if that makes any sense. You hear the reverberation, but you're also sort of hearing the impact. It's difficult. You sort of hear it completely differently than that. Yeah. It's sort of like if a mother feels like a child is threatened and gets angry because of it, like a sort of like the almost a guttural roar they can do of anger or anguish, or sometimes when you get like an inhuman type of noise, and you think that doesn't. Yeah, I know that it's somebody doing it, but it doesn't sound like they're responsible for doing it. Yeah, it's not natural, and they're the kind of noises. I know exactly what he's saying because it is so hard to describe. But it sort of comes from the same dimension, and I know that this is almost dramatizing it, but it doesn't. It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah. It is. It is.
I saw one video and these guys were talking about it, and they said they heard a noise like that, and they described it like that it was almost like it was in their head rather than in their ears. That was the way they tried to describe it. But then they said, but we all heard it, but it was like it was in us. It was like it was all coming through us somehow, rather than. So it just sounded really unnatural, and I think that was their way of trying to describe what you're saying, that it was not like a noise. But I think that's what they're trying to say.
I get you. Now I have heard both. Sorry, Jamie, my baby. But I want to pick up on it while we're here, as it were, because I've sort of like I've heard it whether you do hear it acoustically. I know that I'm hearing it because I can hear. You can tell that it's environmental. But I've also heard noises that are inside me. I can relate to it so much. I've heard noises that are sort of inside my head, as it were. Now, voices, a lot. And it can be like, well, there you go. Then if you're hearing voices inside your head, you got a couple of things going on, fella. You might want to visit your GP kind of thing. Or you might want to get on a leather sofa and lie down and tell us about what your granddad did to you. Show us on the bear where you got touched, that kind of thing. And it's not at that kind of level. It's like you could take a recorder out and you can catch your EVP now. I mean, you're supposed, technically speak, you can have EVP and disembodied voices. And a disembodied voice can be an EVP, but an EVP is not necessarily a disembodied voice. So you can do a recording, an audio recording. You will hear nothing in real time, so you're not hearing a disembodied voice as such, but you will pick it up on media. You'll pick it up on the microphone of a video camera. You'll pick it up on an audio recorder. And you obviously you can't find any reason why that should be there, because there is nothing there that should have caused it, so on and so forth. And you can hear a disembodied voice that isn't caught by an audio recorder, but you hear it in real time. But again, there is no, as far as you're aware, reasonable explanation as to why you should be hearing something like your name being called, or what sounds like whisper, or the sound of a child crying, or a woman moaning, or a man farting usually, or something like that. It's not always easy to explain these things. So you can differentiate between the two, and they sort of they're not mutually exclusive. Is what I'm trying to say. But audio is such a weird thing, and this is why I picked up on it when you mentioned it earlier. I think it is a massive part of it. It is a big part of people's experiences. Is sensory stimuli, as in feeling. I think it's static electrical charges, which are giving people the feeling of the air standing up on the back of the neck more often than not. They won't want to admit it, but it is. Environmental changes in pressure and EMF. But apart from feeling cold or feeling like they're being watched, again, you start going into the realms of psychology and such. The other main one is auditory. It is auditory phenomena rather than visual mostly. And as far as evidence is, for me, it's been auditory.
That's where the real evidence comes from. That's interesting. That's the interesting stuff. When I was looking at a few little videos of people saying things, it was the auditory stuff that seemed to be. I don't know if that's how easily that would be faked, but it didn't seem to be disingenuous. The visual stuff, I don't think I've seen any visual stuff that convinced me of anything, or I even considered all that interesting. But that's YouTube, though.
Yeah, we might have to do a bit. I don't know. I've seen some very strange.
Yeah, but so much crap is faked on YouTube. It's just sifting through the crap. For every one interesting video, there's 50 faked videos of people just trying to get clicks, and that's the same with UFO stuff as well. So
absolutely, totally agree with
that. Me doing 2 or 3 hours of sourcing for this stuff, trying to find something interesting is very difficult.
Well, I mean, it is. I can do. I'm not going to because I'm not embarrassing myself, but I can do. I can do an imitation of an owl. It doesn't mean I am an owl, but I can do an imitation of an owl. But by the same token, just because I can do an imitation of an owl doesn't mean that owls don't exist. Just because I fake the noise, you know what I mean? So yeah, the internet is absolutely replete with people doing absolutely. And I know what you mean about the UFO stuff because the amount of CGI is it's belittled.
It's amazing
the
how
field,
often it gets repeated as well. You've seen
but-
that ball of lightning going over the railway track.
I have
Lovely
bit of
seen that.
CGI.
It's repeated constantly. It's not real. It's a lovely bit of CGI.
I think there's only ever once been ball lightning ever caught, and it was like in the 1970s, and it's very grainy footage at a distance, an orange ball of light that fizzles out.
And ball lightning exists. It's been caught, thing, and they understand the physics of that. But this thing isn't that. It's but
no.
Oh, and the one goes back. The police, the army helicopter with a flying saucer was on. It went around Facebook. Oh, sorry, went around Facebook a couple of days ago, and it's like it's very clearly CGI. It's good CGI, but it's very clearly CGI. When I was researching the TR3B, it's like fake. Oh, that might be interesting. Fake. It's one thing after another. But
there are some classical sort of like clips, classic clips. I beg your pardon. Thank you, mate. Clips that sort of like stood, if for want of better terminology, stood the test of time. They do tend to be older. It does have to be said. They do tend to be older. These ones. What amazes me, people can do a search for these. There's lots of them if they're out there. I mean, a big one will be. I suppose would be Devil's Den, the apparitions that were caught at Devil's Den, the Gettysburg battlefield. That's a very interesting one. It's never been debunked. The one where it appears, I'll use another Gettysburg example. The one where it appears that something walks towards the cannons on the right hand side. That's just a stain on the window.
Steve, you did a video on that. That was one of the first videos I ever saw of yours, Steve. That was really good.
You can believe in that one if you want, people, but I'm afraid you're gonna.
You got so much shit for that, Steve.
You what, sorry?
But it moved, and it wasn't a dribble of water or something.
Yeah, it was just a mark on the windscreen of the car. Yeah, and as the person in the camera was moving the camera, you could see it was a
motion parallax.
Yeah.
There's your motion. There's
your
motion.
So creepy though, until you pointed out, look at this bit, and then I'm like, man, that was one of the first things I saw yours, Steve.
In the UFO world, I suppose a similar one would be the Concorde footage with the little white ball. What tracks as the camera moves?
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be a similar one, wouldn't it?
There's a lot of videos like that, though, isn't there? That it's light reflecting. Or something like that. Particularly when you then suddenly realize you're looking through a window.
I think it is. Again, it depends on how geeky you want to be regarding investigation. Because I went that way. I wore that T-shirt. You got to look into. People don't understand solar flare or lens flare and chromatic aberration. So they will believe every single little thing they see on a camera. Not everybody. I'm not saying everybody because that's a massively sweeping statement to make. And we don't do that here, do we? Well, I don't. But, you've got to understand the equipment. You've got to understand what you're working with. I mean, I've seen people explain video footage away and saying, well, I know for a fact that it's this. And going, okay, well, why? And it's going, well, because you can see that it's this. It's obvious. Well, no, because now you just believe. Yeah, obvious. It's like, well, no, now you just believe what you see. Are you aware of what we call digital artification that's on CCD, which are charge couple devices that are usually the remit of older cameras? Are you aware? Can you tell me the resolution of that sensor? And when they're like, pardon? That going, well, exactly. You don't know what you're talking about. So how are you in a position to debunk it?
Yeah. Exactly. Have you ever seen the 9/11? Just change the subject slightly. The 9/11 thing, that there was a theory that the aircraft were holograms, because at one point it appears that the wings disappear, and it's just an artifact of the cameras. The wings aren't disappearing. It's to do with pixelation and blah, blah, blah. I think they were quite early digital cameras, basically. They're not. They don't disappear.
You're dragging me. No, I'm not even playing this game with you.
We will do 9/11 videos one day, and we'll do.
Yeah,
were the planes even there? Yes, they were. That's very simple. That will be a very short video.
I'm not even playing this game with you. Well, I will rise just a tiddy bit. I'll just do a bit of a bit.
Show us a bit of titty.
You just show a bit of titty. I'll do the meerkat thing a little bit and raise the old head up. Is it? Oh, very nice. Is the the amount of people on the ground that reported gave completely different reports as to what they saw until the narrative of the media changed before the second impact, if that makes any sense. The way that they described it, a military jet, what looked like a missile, so on and so forth. So what people were seeing on most of the eyewitnesses on the ground before the second impact and before the fire department got there, the first responders, didn't match up with what the first video saw.
But we've already said how poor eyewitnesses are.
Yes, absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
I would.
A lot of people got it wrong, though.
We're going to do a 9/11 video shortly because it's such a fascinating thing, Building 7 in particular. But I would argue always, if I was planning the 9/11 attacks, I wouldn't use a missile and I wouldn't use things. I would use a passenger plane because I would keep it as simple as humanly possible. My narrative is going to be that a passenger plane is going to fly into that building. I'll fly a passenger plane into that building. I might fill it with explosives. I might do something to the building to make sure I might do lots of things, but I would make sure that is the main argument for why I always think a passenger plane hit the Pentagon, was because that's what I would want to do, because then the risk is lower of you getting caught. The Pentagon building becomes complicated though, because I actually know a military pilot of 20 years, and he explained to me how difficult it would be to hit a 4-story building with a passenger plane, because when a plane comes down, as it comes close to the ground, the air basically cushions and the aircraft wants to bounce back up again, and at speed it's very, very difficult to hit a building. So he said, so I actually think they would want to hit an aircraft, they would want to fly an aircraft into a building, but they might have had to use a missile. But with everything else,
trees,
yeah. Well, and the taking of all the CCTV all around in every position from every location around the Pentagon and so forth. We can do it to death. I will say this, like, I know that whenever. Not that I have a lot, but when I have spoke about this, it's like, well, what do you know? You know what I mean? It's why would you care? You're a Brit. It happened in New York. I mean, that is, well, actually, the second largest loss of life on 9/11 after the USA was the UK. Yeah. After the USA, the United Kingdom, we lost more citizens than any other country apart from the USA during the 9/11 attacks. It directly affected us. It was pretty much the death of Concorde, especially after the crash, but, coupled with the fact of the Twin Towers, because of the loss of Cantor Fitzgerald and other businesses like that, many of the flights to the World Trade Center were the quick hops from businessmen from London to New York. That's, so it's not like we're in a position where we want to vehemently go against any official explanation. We've got just as much invested in this as anybody else.
And I would argue as well that we were then dragged into the Iraq War and the Afghanistan War, which has lasted over 20 years and seen thousands of military casualties on the British side. We've got just as much right to ask if some of these things were faked. Were we actually dragged into not just illegal but immoral conflicts based on lies? I would say we've got just as much right to ask the question as any American.
I think that's an excellent statement to make. That I mean, given where we're at now, given the divide or the rift that's starting to stand out between the UK and the USA regarding bringing people out of Afghanistan because of the Taliban taking over Afghanistan again. The collapse in communication between the UK and the USA after everything that's gone on. I mean, in every single conflict, pretty much. And maybe not a lot of people might know this, but you've just got to look at Korea and also Vietnam. When the Americans have gone in, we've not been far behind. When it's come to putting boots on the ground, the UK has made the sacrifice now, and you've got to make it relative. Okay, you've got to make it relative. So to say, yeah, well, there was 50,000, say, Americans died and whatever, but only 5,000 Brits died. It's relative to the deployment numbers, it's still a high percentage. You know, if I'm a millionaire and I give you £10, it's not as much of a sacrifice if I've got no money at all, but I give you my last £10. It's relative. You know, it's out of deployment. We massively invested in every single undertaking since 9/11. We were directly involved in it. So I agree with you. I think we've got every right to talk about it. And for the people in the side chat, we have been talking for a while actually about doing a 20th anniversary. Should he have said that?
Isn't it? Oh God, it's only in 2 weeks.
It's only in a couple of weeks, yes.
Yeah,
Okay, well, that's what we're doing in 2 weeks, and we'll have to do a 20th anniversary and we'll just talk about bits. For me, the Building 7 and the Pentagon are the most interesting. For me,
Yeah,
the evidence really supports that something dodgy was going on. But anyway, we'll leave it at that. So we'll wrap it up. And yeah, bless you, Steve. Well done. What an interesting conversation. We've had a couple of weeks off. We said we wanted to come back with something juicy, and we did. And I think it's definitely something that we are going to have to go on a ghost hunt or a paranormal investigation, to call it a better, less cheesy way of putting it, because it's something I want to experience, because I may still come away and go, I still don't believe in ghosts, but I use the word believe very carefully, because it is a belief. It's not based on evidence, and I'd like to have a little bit more evidence to base an opinion on. I don't like having an opinion that I...
Should we let Dave choose where we're going to go?
I think so, yeah.
I have got no problem whatsoever in coming up with a location that might prove interesting, boys. Honest, I'm okay with that. Yeah,
excellent.
Let's do that. So I imagine next week we'll be on Dave's channel. We will have a chat about that. The following week, apparently, we're doing 9/11. So there you go. That's already set. That means that helps me no end, because I don't have to stress thinking about what subject we're going to do. So
no, I'm back on it. I'm back on.
Get on. So we'll think next week. But guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, you've been amazing, and thank everybody in the chat. Your comments have been great tonight. Really interesting. You brought up a few subjects we didn't touch on because it was taking us a bit too far off the planned subject, but we will make note and discuss them in the future. Somebody mentioned Loch Ness earlier. I'm like, okay, we'll have to do a thing on that, but I think that might be a short video as well. Doesn't exist.
Big sturgeon.
A big sturgeon, yeah. And a few fakes, unfortunately. But
yeah.
Anyway, guys, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. We'll see you next week.
Cheers, chat people. Cheers, guys. Love you all.
Thanks, everyone.
Subscribe.
Bye-bye. Thank you.